तिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नम ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा। So welcome to the Srimad Bhagavatam thematic series. Yesterday we completed the discussion on the answer to the fifth question. Which are the various Leela avatars which the Lord enacts or takes the forms and enacts pastimes in this material world? And Suta Goswami listed the 22 incarnations. And then there are unlimited incarnations, and he proves in the Paribhasha Sutra that although Krishna is counted as one of the incarnations, but he is Swayam Bhagavan. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So we discussed that verse. So now, after answering this fifth question, now the only one question which has to be answered is the sixth question, that when Krishna has left this abode, wherein Dharma and Gyan have taken shelter. Dharma kam sharanam gata. Krishna has gone to his abode. So before answering that question, Suta Goswami discusses a very important philosophical concept, and he will establish that although he has listed these 22 incarnations, but among the 22 incarnations, there is no mention of the Virata Purusha or the Vishwarupa. Why is it? So he gives a very important philosophical explanation for that. So let's go into that explanation, which is verses 30 to 39. He explains this. So the imaginary material forms of the Virat Purusha and Jiva, they are imaginary, and that's why especially the forms of the Lord, The Virata Purusha are imaginary, and that's why they are not counted as incarnations. What to speak of the Lord's form in the form of the Virat Purusha is imaginary. Even the Jivas, gross and subtle forms are imaginary. They are made of matter. So only the spiritual forms of the Lord and the Jiva are eternal. So this is a very important philosophical discussion which which Sut Goswami begins here. So let's discuss this. Etadrupam bhagavato hi arupasya chidatmana maya guner virachitam mahadadibir atmani. This material realm composed virachitam, this material realm which is the 14 planetary systems, is composed of what? Of the material gunas, maya guner. And these material gunas are what? They are the elements beginning from Mahatattva. And the elements from Mahatattva to earth, Maha Adibir, with the Paramatma as its basis, Atmani is a material form of the Lord. Maya Guner, who has a spiritual form of conscious. Etad Rupam Bhagavato Chidatmana. So, this universe is conceived as the form of the Lord. And this will come especially in the second canto, third canto, it will come in the fifth canto. And the descriptions are there also in some other cantos, especially in the 10th canto, some prayers are there. In the 11th canto, it will come up. So this Virat form, where the universe is conceived as the form of the Lord, this form is imaginary. But just like this body made of the material elements is the basis of the Atma. Similarly, this body in the form of the universe, Paramatma is the Atma. Paramatma is the soul of this universe. So its basis is the Paramatma, but the construction of this universe is made from the material elements beginning from Mahatattva, and it is a material form. It is a material form. Maya Guner. It is a material form. And this is different from the Lord's form, Bhagavata Rupam, because it is Chidatmana. Chidatmana. Chidatmana means it is a spiritual form of consciousness or Vishuddha Sattva. And this form of the Lord is He Arupasya. Arupasya means it is devoid of material form. It is devoid of material form. So the universal form composed of matter is not counted among the avatars such as Matsya and Kurm, composed of Vishuddha Sattva. So this is the point. Prabhupada explains this very nicely. The conception of the Lord as the Vishvarupa or the Virata Rupa is particularly not mentioned along with the various incarnations of the Lord, because all the incarnations of the Lord mentioned above are transcendental, and there is not a tinge of materialism in their bodies. So again, now we cannot go quite elaborately into the discussion of the Virata Purusha, which is the subject matter of the second canto and the third canto, especially because it will require several classes. But I'll just summarize here in this discussion whatever Prabhupada is saying, only limited to that. Now, first of all, Prabhupada says this is a conception. So it's a conceptual tool. It's a conceptual tool used for meditation. Like I'll give you, one has Desha Bhakti. This Desha Bhakti is there, and you need a Vigraha for it. So that seeing that you can, develop emotions of Desha Bhakti, Bhavana of Desha Bhakti. So you have this abstract concept which is there, you give it a form in the form of the Indian flag or the American flag, whatever it is. Just seeing the flag, devotion arises for Desha Bhakti. So it is an abstract concept which is given form so that you can use that as a tool for meditation. So the Virata Purusha is the term used in the Bhagavatam, and the Virata Purusha is the form, the universe actually, which is made of the material elements. Now, it is given, this abstract concept is given a form in the form of that, the lower planetary systems is his feet, the upper planetary system, that is the Satyaloka, is the face, and the middle planetary systems are his thighs. So this kind of a conception is given so that we can meditate. Using this conceptual tool, we can meditate at this is the form of the Lord. Now, because this universe is the power extension of the Lord, or what we can say is the Shakti of the Lord, and the Lord is Shaktiman, and he's Chidatmana, he's transcendental. The Shakti is the manifestation of the Shaktiman, and it is made of material elements, and there is no difference between the Shakti and the Shaktiman. So those who are neophytes, especially the yogis, who cannot conceive the transcendental form of the Lord, they are given this conception of the Virata Purusha, both the gross and the subtle, so that they can meditate and purify the consciousness and slowly, gradually evolve to God consciousness or self-realization. Now, this is for the yogis, and even for neophyte devotees, uh, it is a tool to remember the Lord. That's why, in the Vibhuti Yoga, it is there in the 10th chapter. And right in the Bhagavatam, we are seeing the first canto, we are discussing these principal verses. It will come very elaborately. Many chapters are devoted for the Virata Purusha discussion. Why? Ultimately, we worship Sham Sundar Krishna. So why we should, study this then? In fact, we are caught up in matter, and we can see everything in this world as matter, and our consciousness is deeply steeped in matter. So we cannot, our heart is not purified so that we can see everything as Sham Sundar. Premanjuna Churita Bhakti Vilochinaya Yam Shama Sundar Rupa Chinta Guna Swarupam. So those whose heart is pure, they can see the Sham Sundar form of the Lord in the heart, and everywhere outside they can see. But our heart, which is contaminated with unlimited samskaras, it can see only matter. So start seeing spirit in matter by, seeing the Virat Purusha and remembering, oh, the rivers are compared to the veins of the Lord's body. And just when you see the rivers, oh, this is the veins of the Lord's body. So you're remembering the Lord, and that remembrance purifies the heart, and slowly, slowly we advance. So the devotees use this as a tool for remembrance. The yogis use a tool for conception, for meditation on the gross and the subtle forms of the Virata Purusha. There is no difference between the body and self, as there is no as there is in the conditions all. So Shakti and Shaktiman, there is no difference. The Lord's form is Chidatmana, and the form of the Virat Purusha is made of material elements, but there is no difference. There is no difference. The Virat Purusha is conceived for those who are just neophyte worshippers. And I mentioned this is for the yogis, and even for the neophyte devotees, for remembering the Lord. For them, the material Virat Purusha is presented as it will be explained in the second canto. In the Virat Rup, the material manifestations of the different planets have to be conceived as his legs, hands, etc. I mentioned this already. Actually, all these descriptions are for neophytes. The neophytes cannot conceive anything beyond matter. I explained already this. The material conception of the Lord is not counted in the list of his factual forms. As Paramatma or Supersoul, the Lord is within each and every material form, even within the atoms, but the outward material form is but an imagination, both for the Lord and for the living being. So the outward material form is imagination. But again, kalpita, the term kalpita will come. We saw that in the third chapter also, in the second or the third verse. In the third verse, we saw kalpita, kalpana. But this kalpana is grounded in Shastra. And imagining like this, there is purification of the heart happening, because there is Shastric description of imagining the lower planets as the feet of the Lord, the Satyaloka as the head of the Lord, like this, imagining like this and meditating like this, there is purification happening. But you cannot, have your own imagination. Oh, I'll imagine there is a mountain and there is a blue sky, and the mixing of that two, is Krishna. So such kind of imagination will not have any effect. Only those which have been described in the Shastra, and that kind of imaginations, meditation gives results. But we should remember that uh, it was just imagination, then why, what is the point? If you imagine and visualize like this, it is not given to give any benefit. So this imagination is grounded in Shastra. The present forms of the conditioned souls are also not factual, both the gross and subtle. The conclusion is that the material conception of the body of the Lord as Virata is imaginary. It's an imaginary conception. Both the Lord and the living beings are living spirits and have their original spiritual bodies. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. The universal form of the Lord has been recommended as the first type of worship in the second canto and the other places with such verses as Patalam etasyahi padamulam. Patala is the base of his fate. It will begin in the second canto. Why is this not considered an avatar of the Lord? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur himself is asking a question. And this is how the acharyas, comment in a commentary. They ask a question and they themselves give the answer. And, that's how they give the flow of connection from one verse to another verse. This verse answers the material realm composed of collective and individual universals is a material form of the Lord, which has a spiritual form of consciousness, Chidatmana, and is devoid of a material form, Arupasya. Prabhupada also explained this. So all these universes are material form of the Lord, but the Lord has a spiritual form of consciousness and he is devoid of material form. This material form is composed of material gunas, of the material gunas, and the elements from Mahat Tattva to earth, Mahatadibi, situated on the Paramatma as its basis, Atmani. In other words, this universal form composed of matter is not counted among the avatars such as Matsya and Kurm composed of Vishuddha Sattva. So that's how both Prabhupada and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explain. Any questions you have? Okay, so let's go to the next verse. Now, Ravikant Prabhuji, yes. One second, just hold on. Yes, I'm not able to hear your audio then. Haribol? There's some problem with your audio.
Yes, might be, Prabhuji. Now
yes.
It is fine, Prabhuji?
Yes.
Prabhuji, my question is, you told Paramatma is situated in all the planetary system as a Atma is situated in the body. So
No. What is your statement? Come again, your statement. What did you say?
The Paramatma is situated in all the planetary system.
Paramatma is situated in all the planetary systems? No, please understand. What I mentioned is the entire planetary system.
Yes.
The entire planetary system is conceived as the form of the Lord. The Paramatma is situated in each and every atom, in each and every jiva. Paramatma is all pervading everywhere in the universe. Are you clear?
Yes. Now clear. Yes. Okay.
But hear very carefully, if you don't hear and understand the conceptions are very, very difficult to understand. It takes a lot of deliberation for many, many years to understand concepts. But without understanding conceptions clearly, then, we cannot really make tangible advancement in Krishna consciousness. So that's why we have to have a clear concept and understanding. Yes, Birendra Yadav Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, this Jiva has spiritual body, and it is said that this material body is imaginary.
Yes.
Uh,
It is Maya Virachitam. It doesn't exist in one sense. Just like in the dream, you are in a dream body and you're enjoying, but that body doesn't exist. It's only in your dream you're imagining that you have that king's body and you're enjoying. So similarly, this is all imagination. For the soul, which is the factual reality, this is all illusionary. It's all illusionary. And in fact, the whole material world is illusion.
So it is said imaginary.
Dhamna svena sada nirastakaham kuhakam satyam param dhimahi.
So, Prabhu, my question is, it is said imaginary just because it is temporary and it has to be, bhuta praliyate. It is because of that.
Now you have a form, particular form you have now in this life. This form, before 40 years was not there. And after 50 years, it will not be there. So this form has no existence. It's all imaginary. It's not reality. Because it is composed of Mahadadibi.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, now Sut Goswami gives an example to understand. Yatha nabasi megao renurva partivo nile evam drishtari drishtatvam harupitam abuddhabhi. Just as yatha, unintelligent people, abuddhabhi, attribute clouds to be sky. Clouds to be the sky. Nabasi megaho. And the particles of dust are attributed to the air. Renurva parthivo nile. So, evam, unintelligent people, it is implied, see the universe, drishtatvam, the visible form, drishtari, of the Lord as the Lord. Very interesting example is given to understand this principle. Principles are always very difficult to understand. But when the examples are given, then, the example is given to understand the principle. So let us go into this commentary of both Prabhupada and Vishwanath Chakravarti. And with Vishwanath Chakravarti, things will become more clear. Prabhupada says, it is further confirmed herein that with our material eyes and senses, we cannot see the Lord, who is all spirit. We cannot even detect the spiritual spark which exists within the material body of the living being. We look at the outward covering of the body or the subtle mind of the living being, but we cannot see the spiritual spark within the body. So we have to accept the living being's presence by the presence of his gross body. Similarly, those who want to see the Lord with their present material eyes or with their present material senses are advised to meditate on this gigantic external feature called as the Virat Rupa. Now, Prabhupada here makes the terminology, although he had used them interchangeably, because the Vishwarupa is the term used in the Gita and the Virat Rupa is, or the Virata Purusha is in the Bhagavatam. So he says here, the gigantic external feature, that whole universe, is the Virat Rupa. For instance, when a particular gentleman goes in his car, which can be seen very easily, we identify the car with the man within the car. Like the president is going in a limousine and there are security cars and bikes around him and everything is shielded. You cannot see him. He's there inside. Because you know that this is the president car, you cannot see the president, but yet you will see, oh, there goes the president. You don't see him. So similarly, we cannot see the gross soul, but we see the gross body and the subtle psychic existence is there. And we infer that there is a soul. And we see the universe which is the body of the Lord, and we can infer that there is Paramatma. There is Paramatma, although we cannot see the Paramatma. When the president goes out in his particular car, we say, there is the president. For the time being, we identify the car with the president. Similarly, a Buddhabi, less intelligent men who want to see God immediately without necessary qualification are shown first the gigantic material cosmos as the form of the Lord, although the Lord is within and without. So he's shown this is the form of the Lord. Now, example, the clouds in the sky and the blue of the sky are better appreciated in this connection. Although the bluish tint of the sky and the sky itself are different, we conceive the sky, color of the sky is blue. You know, the sky is blue, you say. The sky is invisible. You cannot see the sky. But because of the bluish tint in the sky, we identify for the time being like that. But that is a general conception for the layman only. Now, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's commentary will make it more clear. To what can this be compared? Just as the group of clouds are attributed to the sky. Today, the sky is very cloudy, we say. The sky is invisible. How can the sky be cloudy? Or the particles of dust are attributed to the air. Sometimes it becomes very windy, and the wind carries the dust particles. And you see, the dust particles. And then you say, the air is very windy today, because you're seeing the dust particles. But you cannot see the air. You can see the dust particles. So the form which the air has made with these dust particles, especially those, what is it called? What is it called? A kind of a wind turbulence which comes, some term is called, I don't recollect. If anyone knows, they can type it. So this universal form is attributed to the Lord. So the Lord is invisible, just like the sky is invisible or air is invisible, but the imposition of the clouds and the dust particles and now the universe, is there. It is like a man on a pedestal being called the pedestal. And Prabhupada gave the example of the president in the car. The universal form situated in the Lord is called the Lord. This is the meaning. The universal form, it is situated. It is based on the Lord. Chidatmani. It is situated on the Lord. It is the base. The universe is based on the Lord, but it is called the Lord. What is seen, drishtavyam, what is controlled by the Lord is attributed to the seer or the controller of the Lord, drishtari, which is actually invisible by the foolish people. Abuddhabi. Though sky and air are invisible, we see the sky because it is blue. I see the sky is blue. You cannot see the sky. The sky is invisible. And the air, because it is dusty. When it is dusty, you can see the air, but air is invisible. So the Lord is invisible, but you can see the Lord through the gigantic form in the form of Virata Purusha. This is for the neophytes. Okay. The adventitious qualities of the Lord, of the dust, of the cloud and dust, which are visible, are attributed to the sky and the air, which are actually invisible because they become visible through the clouds and dust. So the Lord who is invisible as Paramatma becomes visible through the Virata Rupa. Thus the meaning here is that the Lord, visible as the universe, is thus worshipped by the yogis situated at the beginning stage of practice. So for the yogis who don't have the conception of the Satchidananda form of the Lord, for them, this conception of the Virat Purusha is a tool so that they can make advancement. And as I mentioned, for the devotees, it is a tool for remembering the Lord. Now, we go to the temple and have the darshan. How much time do we take darshan? 10 minutes? 15 minutes? How many of you tell me you have taken the darshan of the Lord for more than 3 hours? Raise your hands. 3 hours. 2 hours. Raise your hand. 1 hour. Continuously, without any break. Half an hour. Anyone? Raise your hands. 15 minutes at least. Raise your hands. Okay. So my question is, why we cannot, Nadia Chetan Puja, why we cannot take the darshan of the Lord for a long time, long period? Why? Nadia Chaitanya Prabhuji. Why we cannot take darshan of the Lord's form, the deity, for a long period of time? What is the reason? Priya Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji Pranam. Because I think because mind is very flickering, restless. It has to be again
Why
brought
the
back
mind
to
is
the Lord.
flickering and restless?
It has to be again brought back to the Lord. That is what we do in chanting.
Any other thoughts? Anyone? The reason is because the form of the deity, although which is made of material elements, it is completely spiritual. And our consciousness is completely material. So it cannot for long period take darshan. If our consciousness is completely spiritual, we can hours together sit and take darshan. So when we are outside in the world, our consciousness is naturally drawn towards matter. And that's why when we are seeing this world, we should, visualize how this form is also the form of the Lord and remember the Lord so that the consciousness. Keshu keshu cha bhaveshu chintosmi bhagavan mahi. This is the question asked by Arjuna in the 10th chapter. This is, the question. And the Lord is explaining the Vibhuti Yoga. So that is the reason. The mind is also chanchal because of Raja and Tamaguna. Okay. So after in these two verses, this principle was an example. Then he is concluding. Atha param yad avyaktam avyudo guna brahmitam adrashtashuta vastutvat sajivo yat punarbhava. Superior to the gross universal form is that Atha param yad, form which is invisible, avyaktam, devoid of the specific bodily parts, avyuda guna brahmitam, since it cannot be seen or heard, adrishta shruta vasutvat. This is like the subtle body of the jiva, sajivo, which is an instrument of rebirth for the jiva. Yat punar bhava. Prabhupada. As the gross cosmic manifestation is conceived as a gigantic body of the Lord, so also there is the conception of a subtle form, which is simply realized without being seen, heard, or manifest. Adrushta Shruta. The subtle form. Now the subtle form is being discussed. But in fact, all these gross and subtle conceptions of the body are in relationship with the living beings. The living being has a spiritual form beyond this gross material or subtle psychic existence. The gross body and the psychic functions cease to act as soon as the living being leaves the visible gross body. In fact, we say that the living being has gone away because he is unseen and unheard. You cannot see, oh, he has gone. Who has gone? No, he has gone. He's there, his body is lying there. So you have seen the body, you have not seen the person, that is the soul. Even when the gross body is not acting, when the living being is in sound sleep, we know that he is within the body by his breathing. So the living beings passing away from the body does not mean that there is no existence of the living soul. It is there, otherwise how can he repeat his births and again? Because there is a subtle body, yet punar bhavan. Because of the existence of the subtle body, there is repeated birth. The conclusion is that the Lord is eternally existent in his transcendent form, which is neither gross nor subtle like that of the living being. The Lord's body is transcendental and eternally existing, and it is neither like the gross and subtle bodies of the living being. His body is never to be compared to the gross and subtle bodies of the living beings. All such conceptions of God's body are imaginary. I have already explained how we should understand this term imaginary. The living being has an eternal spiritual form, which is conditioned only by his material contamination. Now, Vishnu Chakra Thakur will make it still more clear. Just as the yogis worship the visible form of the universe as the Lord, the visible form is this Virat Purusha, this whole universe, what we see. The mountains are the bones of the Lord, the trees are the hairs, the rivers are his veins, like that. Even though it is material, other yogis worship a subtle form of the universe as a Lord, even though it is also material. So again, there is a conception of the Lord in the heart, Pradesha Matra, it will come in the second canto. It's like a window where we conceive the form of the Paramatma, the subtle form of the Paramatma. This is a subtle form. The gross form is this universe. There is a subtle conception. This subtle conception is also material. Please remember this. These forms are described later. And Vishnu Chakra Thakur gives Amuni Bhagavat Rupe Maya Tehi Anuvarnite Obe Api Na Grananti Maya Shrishte Vipaschita. The wise Vipaschita do not accept Na Grananti, these Amuni, two, Ubhe. Ubhe means two forms of the Lord Bhagavat Rupe described by me, Maya Te Hi Anuvarnita, since they are composed of matter, Maya Shrishti. So this both gross and subtle. Ubhe means gross and subtle. So this is there in the second canto, 10th chapter, where the third description of the Virat Purusha is there. Now, second, verse he gives, Indradayo Bahava Ahur Ushra Karno Disha Stotram Amushya Shabda Nasyat Dashro Paramasya Nase Granosya Gandhomukam Agnir Iddah. The Devatas such as Indra has arms. Indradayo Bahavo Ahu. The Devatas of the direction and the organs of his hearing arise from his ears. Ushra Karno Disha. Sound arises in his organ of hearing. Shrotram Amusha Shabda. The Ashwinis. Nastya, Dashro, Dasyo, Dasro. And the organs of smelling arise from his nostrils. Paramasya Nase. Fragrance arises from his organ of smelling. Grahano Asya Gandho. Flaming fire is his mouth. Mukam Agnir Idhyah. Vijnana Shakti Mahim Amnayanti Sarvatmano Antakaranam Giritram Ashvashvatare Ushtra Gaja Nakhani Sarva Mriga Pashava Shroni Deshe. Again, it is in the second canto. They say that the Mahatvata is his Chitta. Vijnana Shakti Mahim Amnati. Rudra is his false ego. Sarvato Ananta Karnam Giritaram. Horses, mules, camels, and elephants are his nails. All animals are his hips. The subtle form is different from the gross form of the universe. So these are gross form descriptions. There is one, this verse mentions that both are composed of matter. And here is the gross form description. there is another gross form description. The subtle form is different from the gross form of the universe. It is actually invisible or subtle, avyakt, because it is devoid of specific forms. Avyudo guna brahmitam. It does not have evolved hands and feet. Why? It is not like things with form like you, I, or Indra, who can be seen and heard. Adrushya shuta vasutvat. What is the proof of its existence? Proof? What is the proof? The subtle body is the proof. We have a subtle body, and that subtle body, now, it is difficult to, we have a hand and it has a form. The mind, you cannot give any form to it. It's very difficult. That is why these are visible forms. These are avyakta, subtle. They are invisible. They are invisible, and they cannot be seen. You cannot see the mind, but there is the existence of the mind. So subtle body is the proof of the existence. The word jiva should be understood to mean the imposition on the jiva of the subtle body. Sa jivo yat punar bhava, it is mentioned. These forms are attributed to be the Lord, but are not actually the Lord, because both the gross and the subtle bodies are material, and their souls are jivas, individually and collectively. It is said, Virad Hiranyagarbhascha Karanam Chet Upadayah Ishasya Yantribhirhinam Turyam Tat Prachakshate. The universal form of the Lord, Virad, Hiranyagarbha, the form of the collective jivas, Hiranyagarmasya. Hiranyagarma is again, just like there is the gross conception of the Virata Purusha, that what we can see here, the universe. Of course, we cannot see the universe in the form of the 14 planetary systems. Brahma can see that, other yogis might conceive it in their meditation. But conceptualization we can do, and the pictures are there in the Bhagavatam. But what I'm stating here is, just like there is a Paramatma for this gross universe, there is a subtle, conception of the, Paramatma for this universe, and that subtle conception is called as the Hiranyagarbha, who is the form of the collective jivas. Is the cause of the universe, is false. Karanam cheti upadhyaya. Upadhyaya means it's the imposition. The state of the Supreme Lord, Ishasya Yantrived, is said to be prachakshate, devoid of such limitations. Hinam turyam yat. And the Bhagavatam says that both these forms should not be worshipped as quoted above with Amuni Bhagavat Rupam. So both are Maya Shishte. So that's what Vishwanath Chakravarti says. This understanding might be a little difficult, because as long as devotees have not studied the Virat Purusha conception from the second canto and the third canto, this explanation is very, very difficult to understand. And one has to study repeatedly the second and the third canto, because we are caught up in Maya. To study the Lord's pastimes with Yoga Maya, like the 10th canto, we might think it is easy. No, because they are the pastimes of Yoga Maya. But the Lord's Purusha Avatar pastimes with Mahamaya in the form of this creation, this, although it is very technical and philosophical, this is easy for us to understand, because we are caught up in Maya. And the more we study this Maya Rachitam, the more we come out of Maya. And then when we come out of Maya, then we can understand the Lord's pastimes in Yoga Maya. So the repeated study is required to understand these philosophical concepts. Okay, so let us go to text 33. Yatre me sad asadrupe pratisiddhe swasamvida avidya atmani krite iti tad Brahma darshanam. When the gross and subtle material forms, yatre sad asad rupe. Now here it refers to both the gross universal form and the subtle universal form, which is meditated in the heart by the yogis. And it refers to the gross form of this body, what we have, and the subtle form. Now here, it is referring to the gross and subtle forms of the jiva, because previous verse mentioned yad jiva sa jivo yat punarbhava. So here it is referring to not the sameshti but the veshti at the individual level. When the gross and subtle material forms, yatre me sad asad rupe, which are impositions on the soul in ignorance, these are impositions. Avidyaya atmani krite are removed, prasiddhate, by realizations of the devotees. Swasamvida, one can realize Brahman. Iti tad Brahma darshanam. If this is actually all material, how can we see Brahman? This verse answers. Prabhupada's commentary is very, very, very interesting here. The difference between self-realization and material illusion is to know that the temporary or illusory impositions of material energy in the shape of gross and subtle bodies are superficial coverings of the self. I'm not this body, I'm not this mind. No? If you are an illusion that you are this body or mind, they're an illusion, and these are coverings of the Maya Shakti on the self. These coverings take place due to avidya, ignorance. Such coverings are never effective in the person of the personality of the Lord, of Godhead. Knowing this convincingly is called liberation or seeing the absolute. Convincingly. You should have that conviction, means that realization. This means that perfect self-realization is made possible by adoption of godly or spiritual life. Spiritual self-realization means becoming indifferent to the needs of the gross and subtle bodies and becoming serious about the activities of self. So whether you have self-realization, this statement of Prabhupada proves it. You should become completely indifferent to the needs of the gross and subtle bodies. The gross body wants food. You are absorbed in bhajan and you don't realize that you need ahar. The subtle body has desires, but you neglect them. Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmannevatmana tushta tasya pragya pratishtita. Sarvan partha manogatan prajahati, you have given up. You're completely indifferent to the gross and subtle needs. And you're completely serious about the activities of the self. Now, Prabhupada, after he took Vanaprastha and he was in Mathura, initially in the Gaudiya Mutt, I think it was Keshav Maharaj, I don't recollect, in Mathura. And he used to commute back and forth to Delhi to print his books. And in the Delhi, he used to stay in Chippiwada. And the temple pujari is to keep the tiffin. And Prabhupada was so much absorbed in typing and then proofreading and going to the printer back and forth. He was completely indifferent to the bodily needs of even taking prasad, and the tiffin is to be like lying like that, in the evening. So that is self-realization, when you're completely indifferent to the bodily needs. I know, especially one sannyasi, a very dear devotee left the world. And this sannyasi was very closely related to that devotee because he was serving also under him, practically taking a lot of responsibilities. And when this devotee left, he was feeling deep separation and he was arranging for all the other final rites and so many other things. And absorbed like this, 3 days had passed and he had not even had food. And he did not remember to have food also. That was the level of absorption. And then somebody, the police handling, all that, medical doctors, everything, So then one devotee suddenly, while he was going in the car, gave him some fruits. And then he suddenly realized, he came back and he said, "Oh, I've not had for 3 days. So please give me, let me have." So self-realization means completely becoming indifferent to the needs of the gross and subtle body. Prabhupada in the Updeshamrita is saying what? Vacho vegam, manasa krodha vegam, jivva vegam, udarapastha vegam, etan vegan yo vishya dhira, sarvam apimam prithvim shishat. And in the commentary of this, Prabhupada quotes the Anuvritti commentary that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's commentary he quotes, and he says that Prabhupada says here, of course, he's quoting Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. In his Anuvritti explanation of the Updeshamrita, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes that our material identification creates 3 types of urges: urge to speak, demands of the mind, demands of the body. When the living entity falls victim to three types of urges, his life becomes inauspicious. One who practices resisting these demands, urges, called a tapasvi, or one who practices austerities. By such tapasya, one can overcome victimization by material energy, the external potency of the Supreme Personality Godhead. So one who can restrict the urge of the body, urges of the mind, and these urges are because of the influence of Maya, and is completely indifferent. He is self-realized. So forget Krishna consciousness, to be always remembering Krishna. To come to the point of self-realization is a long, long process. We have to become completely indifferent to the gross and subtle needs. And it's not the negative activity of being indifferent to the gross and subtle needs, but completely absorbed in the activity of the soul. Prabhupada is explaining that the impetus for activities is generated from the self, but such activities become illusionary due to ignorance of the real position of the self. So when you act based on the dictation of the mind, that means you are acting under the victimization of the external energy. But when you act from the impetus of the soul and you're indifferent, then you're actually situated on the transcendental platform. By ignorance, self-interest is calculated in terms of gross and subtle bodies, and therefore the whole set of activities is spoiled life after life. When, however, one meets the self by proper culture, the activities of the self begin. That is devotional service. Therefore, a man who is engaged in the activities of self is called Jivan Mukta, or liberated person, even in conditional existence. This perfect stage of self-realization, Swa-Samvida, Prabhupada is explaining in his purport, Swa-Samvida, is attained not by artificial means, but under the lotus feet of the Lord, who is always transcendental, not by karma and jnana, yoga and jnana, but by bhakti. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he is present in everyone's heart, and from him only all knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness takes place. Matta smriti jnanam aponcha. When the living entity desires to be an enjoyer of material energy, illusionary phenomena, the Lord covers the living being in the mystery of forgetfulness. And thus the living being misinterprets the gross body and the subtle mind to be his own self. Avidya Atmani. Avidya Atmani. And by the culture of transcendental knowledge, when the living being prays to the Lord for deliverance from the clutches of forgetfulness, the Lord, by his causeless mercy, removes the living being's illusionary curtain, and thus he realizes his own self. So ultimately, the covering happens by the Lord because of we have the desire to enjoy. And when we have the desire to serve, slowly the Lord removes the Maya curtain. He engages himself in the service of the Lord in his eternal constitutional position, becoming liberated from conditional life. All this is executed by the Lord either through his external potency or directly by the internal potency. So the Lord can do this through his external potency also. Okay, let's take Vishwanath Chakra Thakur's commentary and then take for questions. If this is actually all material, how can we see Brahman? This verse answers. These two material forms, gross and subtle, are removed. This means that the non-material form of the Lord is not removed. These forms are removed by realization, samvidha of the Lord's devotees. So, why are these two forms not situated in the Lord? Two it should be. It is PWO. Maybe some error. These forms are imposed on the jiva by ignorance and are not situated in the Lord. It is said, Dehankaranad, Dehadyayasho, Yasho Jive, Hi Avidyaya, Na Tata Jagad Adyashah, Paramatmani Yunjate. The imposition of body exists, Dehankaranad, in the jiva by ignorance. Jive, Hi Avidyaya, by identifying with the body. Deha Dayasho. In this manner, tata, the universe is not imposed upon Paramatma. Na jagad adhyasa paramatmani yunjate. So the universe is not imposed upon Paramatma. Similarly, the imposition of body and both gross and subtle is, it is not there on the soul, but because of avidya, we think like that. With the removal of these two material forms, one can see Brahman. Now, how that happens, Rumal, will be explained in the next verse. Any questions up till now? Mataji, yes.
Is it that Dhruva in his mind saw the Hiranyagarbha imaginary form of the Lord, and when
No. See, first of all, you have to
his
understand.
concentration broke, suddenly Sakshat
No,
Bhagavan was.
please, hold on. First of all, you have to understand that Dhruva Maharaj was not meditating on the Virata Purusha, neither the gross or the subtle. Please remember this. He was neither meditating on the gross or the subtle. He had knowledge of the spiritual form of the Lord from Narad Muni. And Narad Muni gave him the mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And because he was in Satyuga, he was also practicing the Ashtanga Yoga and practicing austerity and becoming indifferent to the gross and subtle bodies. And the Lord who is in the heart, who is completely spiritual, that Lord in the heart gave darshan to Dhruva. And that same Lord in the heart who gave darshan, he came out and gave darshan in the form of Hiranyagarbha. So both these forms are spiritual. Now, let me explain here very carefully. The yogis have no knowledge of the Satchidananda form of the Lord in the spiritual world. They think that the form of the Lord is this Virat, gigantic form, and they meditate. So by such meditation of this material form, which is imaginary, and this form is the basis is the Paramatma, they get purified. And the Lord, out of his inconceivable mercy, might show them his Satchidananda form of Paramatma, or as Bhagavan also. Now there are other advanced yogis who meditate on the subtle, Virata Purusha. Now this subtle Virata Purusha is again a conception, it is material, remember that. And by meditating like this on the subtle Virata Purusha, the Paramatma who is within the heart can manifest in that subtle conception. Or he might not manifest. He might manifest in that conception, in that window. Just like you have a window which is 2 by 2 and the sun rays fall and the rays from that hole aperture come out and you can see the sun rays. And by looking into that hole and the sun rays where they're coming, because there is light, we can see the sun. So similarly, the Lord is in the hearts, who is situated as a Paramatma, and the conception tool is there of Pradesha Matra, which is given for the yogis, the subtle conception. That is also Maya Rachitam. Please remember, it is Maya Rachitam. But by meditating like that, the Paramatma, who is Sachidanand, he can manifest in that form, in that small form, Pradesh Matra. He can manifest, which is spiritual. He can give him darshan. But for Dhruva Maharaj, he did not meditate neither on the gross or the subtle forms, but he meditated on the Lord, who is completely Sachidanand, through the chanting of Mahamantra of the Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and doing dhyan, and the Lord in the heart, gave him darshan. Is it clear?
Yes, thank you, Prabhuji.
Any other questions anyone has? Yes, Birendra Yadav Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, this subtle form of Virat Rupa, it refers to what actually?
Okay, it's very difficult to understand. You'll have to go to the second canto. There is a conception of conceiving the subtle form. Like we conceive, that the mountains are the bones of the Lord, the trees are hairs on the body. This conception it is. Similarly, there is a subtle conception of how the Lord is Pradesha Matra. The Pradesh Matra is this, Pradesh Matra. And trying to conceive that form, and the description is there. And you start meditating. And just I was mentioning, the grossest example is, of having an aperture of a particular size. And when the sun rays fall on that, the sunlight comes out through that, and you see through that aperture, then you can see the sun. The sun is not in the, that window or aperture. The sun is somewhere far. But that aperture acts as an instrument to see the sun. So similarly, the conception of the subtle Virata Purusha, the meditation, it's again imaginary, but with the purification of the heart, the seer can see the Paramatma, who is actually spiritual, who is the basis of both the gross and the subtle forms, and he can have darshan. Does it make sense?
Yes, Professor. Thank you, bro. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Vinita Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I have understood that Vishwarupa and Virat Rupa are different. But
no, it is a very long subject. It is a vast subject. We'll have to spend some time to understand what are the subtle differences between the Vishwarupa and the Virat Rupa. I just gave you the terminology. I just gave the terminology. The Virat Purusha is a conception which is used in the Bhagavatam. The Vishwarupa is the terminology used in the Gita. I did not go into the subtle differences between the two. Okay. Prabhupada uses them interchangeably, but there are some differences which we will not go into it because again it's a different topic altogether. Yeah, tell me.
Okay. That was my question, because I just wanted to understand in very simple words how are they both very different.
Okay. Now you're coming to the question. Now I'll just point out only 3 points to understand. Okay. The Virata Purusha, now we have understood that it is a conception of Maya Rachita, of conceiving the form of the Lord, of this universe. Now it is material. Now the Vishwarupa is a term used in the Gita. The Vishwarupa is spiritual. Okay. Now there are 2 types. There is the top up and the top down and the down up. Now down up is the Virata Purusha. Like we conceive the material form, and ultimately by sincere practice, the Paramatma who is spiritual, can give darshan. So down to up you're going to the Satchidana form. Whereas There is the Sachidananda form of Krishna who is standing on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and he, expands himself and shows the Virata Purusha of how this entire universe, all the devatas, are in his body. So his body himself is expanding and showing. So this is the top down. So this form of the Vishwarupa is spiritual because Krishna himself, Sachidananda form, is expanding himself and showing this form. Another example is the Vaman Rupa. Vaman Rupa is just, he's a Batu Brahmachari, dwarf, and he expanded, covering the entire universe. So that form covering the entire Vishwa universe is a spiritual form. So it is the top down, and this is the down top. So that's the difference, subtle differences you can see between the Vishwarupa and the Virata Purusha.
Yeah.
Is it okay?
To some extent, yes, Prabhuji.
It takes quite a long time.
Yeah, but
Years
it was
of study of second and third canto and
Yeah.
repeated hearing. And, it is very taxing, and devotees don't take the trouble and they think they can go to the 10th canto. No, you just stick on to second canto and third canto. Prabhupada says, as long as one is not free from lust, one should not go to the third canto also, he says. So one should repeatedly study the first and second cantos and repeatedly hear, especially the second and the third cantos.
Prabhuji, I had one more question.
Yes.
Are there any restrictions of reading the Srimad Bhagavatam? Like,
Are there?
Any restrictions like you should be pious and all? Like the
No,
first
absolutely,
morning.
there is no restriction. You can just start reading. Anyone can read, especially if the first and second cantos. 10th canto, yes, there is adhikar required. But canto after canto, and one should at least read first and second cantos.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Hare Krishna.